The dog was lying still when she found him. Covered in a layer of frost, his golden fur dulled by weeks of dirt and cold. His breathing was shallow. But it was his eyes that hit her hardest, eyes that had once been bright and playful, now quiet and distant. Emily knelt beside him, snow crunching beneath her knees. The cabin was barely standing, but it was the place they'd last been together. The place she'd run from. Now she was back. And he was still here. She touched his paw gently. "Please stay this time," she whispered. And for the first time in years, he blinked. Emily hadn't planned to return to Alder Ridge. In fact, she'd sworn she never would. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone remembered your name, and even worse, your pain. It had been almost 3 years since she left, but the memories stayed sharper than she wanted. The scent of pine, the sharp curve of the highway just before the overlook, the rusting mailbox outside the only gas station still open in winter, all of it came flooding back the moment her tires hit gravel. The sky above was cold and gray, the clouds stitched tightly together like a quilt of silence. She parked the car by the old hiking trail just past the edge of town. The cabin wasn't far. Half a mile on foot, maybe less if the trail hadn't vanished under snow. She reached into the passenger seat and grabbed her backpack. Inside were only a few things: a flashlight, a first aid kit, a thermal blanket, and one small Ziploc bag with a dog biscuit inside, the last one from a box she'd found packed away in her mother's garage. It wasn't much, but she didn't know what else to bring. She hadn't seen Cooper since the day she ran. Her boots sank slightly into the snow with each step, the trail barely visible beneath patches of slush and pine needles. She walked slowly, scanning the woods for movement, for any sign of a golden blur darting between the trees. But the forest was quiet. Too quiet. Cooper had always been a runner. Even as a pup, he'd outrun every leash, every fence. He hated being boxed in, but he never wandered far from Emily. When her father left, Cooper curled beside her door every night. When her mom got sick, he was the first one to lick away her tears. And when Emily herself couldn't take it anymore and just disappeared, Cooper had chased after her until she screamed at him to go back. And somehow, he listened. She'd looked back just once, and he was sitting there on the trail. Waiting. The cabin appeared through the trees like a ghost, half collapsed, one window broken, snow piled up along the outer walls. It hadn't been lived in since that winter. She'd hoped it might still be standing, though part of her was afraid it wouldn't be. She stepped up onto the creaking porch, carefully testing the boards beneath her weight. Then she opened the door. The air was thick with cold and silence. But not empty. There was something inside. She heard it, barely. A low, rasping breath. Her heart slammed into her chest as she stepped in. And there he was. Cooper lay on the far side of the room, beside what had once been a small wood stove. A tattered blanket barely covered his body, and his fur was matted and dirty. He didn't lift his head when she entered. He didn't move at all. But his eyes, they were open. Watching her. "Cooper," her voice cracked. She dropped to her knees beside him, her bag thudding softly to the floor. "I didn't think," she choked on the words. "I wasn't sure if..." She couldn't finish. She reached out and touched his paw. It was dry. Cold. But not lifeless. He blinked. She opened her pack quickly, pulling out the blanket first and wrapping it gently around his body. Then she unzipped the biscuit bag, breaking it in half and holding it near his muzzle. "Come on, boy." "Just a little," she whispered. At first, he didn't respond. Then his nose twitched. His tongue flicked out once, then again, slowly licking the treat from her palm. It was weak, barely more than a movement, but it was enough. "You stayed," she said softly. "After all this time." He blinked again. A slow, deliberate blink. She pressed her forehead gently to his and let herself cry. It took her hours to make the cabin barely livable again. She cleared out the snowdrift near the doorway, used her flashlight and thermal blanket to insulate one corner, and built a crude barrier from broken furniture to keep the wind out. She rubbed Cooper's limbs gently, checking for frostbite, for injury. He didn't resist. He didn't even whimper. He just let her work. And when the night fell and the darkness crept through the windows, he was still breathing. Still alive. She lay beside him, pulling the blanket over both of them, her body warming as slowly. "I'm not leaving again," she whispered. "Not without you." She didn't sleep much. Each time Cooper shifted slightly or coughed, she sat up to check on him. The cold made everything feel slower, suspended. But it also made every sound sharper, every breath a reminder. She couldn't stop thinking about how she'd left. About the days she screamed at him to go home. She thought she was doing the right thing, pushing him away so he wouldn't follow her into her breakdown. But now, curled beside his failing body, she realized he never stopped waiting. He didn't move on. He didn't forget. He just stayed. Morning came with pale light and silence. Emily stepped outside briefly to gather some snow in a pot she found, melted it over a candle flame, and coaxed Cooper to sip a few drops. He did. Slowly. But he did. And that was enough. The next morning, Emily awoke to the gentle sound of movement. It wasn't much, just the shift of fur against fabric, the soft scrape of claws over old wooden floorboards. But to her, it felt like thunder. She sat up quickly, heart racing. Cooper was awake. His head was still resting on the floor, but his eyes were clearer. And more than that, he had moved. Not far, just enough to curl his legs underneath his body, like he was trying to sit up. "Hey," she whispered, inching closer. "Hey, big guy." His eyes locked with hers. And this time, his tail moved. Just once. But it moved. Emily smiled through a sudden flood of tears. She reached into her pack and pulled out the other half of the biscuit from yesterday. He took it slower this time, chewing weakly. "You're still in there," she said. "I knew it." She spent the next few hours cleaning the cabin. It was in worse shape than she remembered. The roof sagged in the back corner. The insulation had all but disintegrated. A raccoon had clearly claimed part of the pantry for itself at some point, shredded fabric, little paw prints in the dust. Still, it was standing. She found an old tin bowl in a corner, rinsed it with melted snow, and filled it with warm water. Cooper drank this time. Not much, but enough that she knew he wasn't giving up. She combed his fur gently with her fingers, pulling out burrs and bits of bark, talking softly the entire time. "I'm going to fix this place. Just enough to get us through the week. You don't need to worry about anything, okay?" He closed his eyes again, but his breathing was steadier now. Later that afternoon, Emily took a walk around the perimeter of the cabin, looking for anything salvageable. She found 2 half-burned logs by the rusted fire ring outside and the broken-down remnants of a woodpile beneath a fallen tarp. Inside the tarp was something she didn't expect, a box. Moldy on the outside, but sealed tight. Inside, a pair of folded wool blankets, a sealed first aid tin, and an old photo. She held the photo up to the light. It was her, maybe 16 years old, laughing in the snow, Cooper mid-leap beside her. Her mom must have taken it. She hadn't seen that photo in years. It had somehow survived. She stared at it for a long time before tucking it gently into her coat pocket. When she got back inside, Cooper was still lying in the same spot, but his head lifted when she stepped through the door. His ears perked slightly. He even gave a low, rumbling whine, half greeting, half question. "I know," she said. "I shouldn't have stayed gone this long." She sat next to him again and unrolled one of the wool blankets. "I didn't forget you." "Not once." She laid the blanket over him, making sure to tuck it just beneath his chin the way he used to like it. She used to do that on stormy nights, when the thunder got too loud and he'd curl up in the closet. He always hated loud sounds. And goodbyes. The wind howled that night, but the cabin held. Emily lit the old lantern she'd found under the sink. It smelled of kerosene and age, but it gave the room a soft glow. She sat beside Cooper, notebook in hand, and began to write. She didn't know what, really. Just words. Memories. Stories she didn't want to forget anymore. When she looked up, Cooper was watching her. She smiled. "Want me to read something?" His eyes didn't blink. She took that as a yes. So she read him the story of how they first met. She was 6. Her father had just left. Her mom brought home a puppy from the local shelter, too big for a puppy, too loud, too wild. But he'd chosen Emily. The first night, he chewed through a kitchen chair and then curled up beside her bed, whimpering until she let him climb under the covers. "He always liked feet," she said aloud. "Remember that?" Cooper shifted slightly and placed his paw over her boot. Her throat tightened. The next day, Emily hiked into town. She hated leaving him, but she had no choice. He needed real food. And if she wanted to stay in that cabin for more than 2 days, she needed supplies. She left the door cracked slightly, in case he somehow found the strength to wander. Left a trail of biscuit crumbs from the door to his blanket. It wasn't much, but it felt like a promise. Town hadn't changed. The same gas station. The same 2 diners. And the same judgmental stares. She avoided them all, went straight to the hardware store. Bought firewood, a space heater, protein-rich dog food, and a fresh water jug. The cashier, an older man with silver hair and a permanent scowl, raised an eyebrow as she rang everything up. "Back for a visit?" he asked. She shook her head. "Back for good." He studied her for a moment. Then he rang up a can of kerosene and added it to the bag. "No charge." When she returned, the cabin was quiet again. But warmer. Cooper hadn't moved far, but he had shifted closer to the stove. His eyes lit up when he saw her. And when she opened the food and placed it in a tin bowl, he ate. Not all of it, not fast, but he ate. And afterward, he nudged his head into her lap and sighed. Emily stroked his fur and whispered, "We're gonna be okay now." For the first time, she believed it. The third morning arrived gentler than the others. The wind had died down overnight, and pale sunlight draped itself across the cabin floor like a quiet visitor. Emily stirred under her blanket, unsure what had woken her, until she heard it. A soft shuffle. A paw against wood. Then another. She opened her eyes and blinked toward the stove. Cooper was on his feet. Unsteady, yes. Wobbly and frail. But standing. Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. "Hey," she whispered, sitting up slowly so she wouldn't startle him. "Look at you." Cooper lifted his head, ears twitching slightly. His tail swayed once, weak but intentional. He took one small step toward her and collapsed back down, but the effort was unmistakable. She crawled toward him and knelt, cupping his face gently in her hands. "You stubborn, impossible miracle," she whispered, laughing and crying at once. He licked her cheek. The first sign of affection since she'd found him. Later that morning, she coaxed him toward the door. It wasn't easy. He had to pause every few feet. His back legs dragged slightly. But together, they made it to the threshold. Emily opened the cabin door wide, letting a stream of sunlight fall across the wooden floor. Cooper paused, sniffed the fresh air, and took a step outside. Then another. Then he sat down on the top step of the porch and stared out into the trees. Emily stood behind him, arms crossed against the cold, watching him. "I missed this," she said quietly. "Us." Cooper didn't respond, not with sound. But he didn't look away either. And she knew that meant everything. That afternoon, she began cleaning the cabin properly. She swept out the broken glass from the corner window, patched the cracks with folded plastic tarp she'd bought in town, and nailed a blanket over the drafty door frame. She even fixed the hinge on the back wall's small storage cabinet, which creaked open to reveal a stack of old notepads from when she was a kid. She flipped through one. It was mostly drawings, stick figures of her, Cooper, and her mom. There was a picture of the three of them in a canoe, even though they never actually went canoeing. Still, it made her smile. She left the notebook open on the counter. A reminder. Cooper slept most of the afternoon, curled in a patch of sun by the door. She set up his food and water bowl nearby, along with an extra blanket in case the wind returned. But the cold was soft now. The kind of cold you could live in. Emily sat on the floor beside him, patting his head. "You remember the first time it snowed and you tried to eat an entire snowball?" she said. "You had brain freeze for like 2 hours." Cooper's tail thumped softly. She laughed. "Yeah. That was the year you stole the turkey leg from the counter on Thanksgiving." His eyes blinked slowly, content. That night, she built a real fire in the old stove. She hadn't tried until now, worried the chimney would be blocked. But after checking it carefully, she found it surprisingly intact. The heat filled the cabin like a blanket. Real warmth. The kind that didn't just fight off the cold but invited you to stay a little longer. She lay next to Cooper again that night, this time without fear. He snored lightly, his body finally at ease. And for the first time in 3 years, she dreamed without guilt. In her dream, she was back in high school. It was the day her mom died. She was walking home from the hospital when the principal called her. She didn't answer. Instead, she kept walking. Cooper had been waiting on the porch when she got there, tail wagging, like he knew. She didn't say anything. Just dropped to her knees and held him. In the dream, she whispered, "I don't want to do this alone." And the dog, Dream Cooper, just licked her tears away. She woke with a quiet gasp. The fire had burned low. But Cooper was still there, his body curled tightly beside hers. Still breathing. Still staying. That morning, Emily made a list. It was small, only 5 items. Get Cooper to the vet. Restock cabin supplies. Reinforce the roof. Check on the property lines. Stay. It was that last one that made her pause. Stay. It wasn't a command. It was a promise. The cabin, she realized, wasn't just a hideaway anymore. It wasn't just a place tied to the worst day of her life. It was also where Cooper had waited. Where he'd lived, even when she was too broken to come back. It was the place that deserved healing just as much as either of them. She stepped outside again that afternoon, Cooper slowly following. She brought out a small tarp and some tools from the back of the car. Nothing fancy. Just basics. She began clearing the snow from the roof's edge, replacing rotted boards with spare planks she'd bought in town. She climbed carefully, using the ladder one rung at a time. It felt good to work. To repair something. To take control of what broke. Cooper lay in the sun, watching her with quiet amusement. Every time she looked down, he was there. Like always. When she came back down, she knelt beside him and kissed his head. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's stay." By the end of the week, Cooper was eating twice a day and walking more steadily. He couldn't go far, his hind legs still gave out every now and then, but the spark in his eyes had returned. Emily felt like she was witnessing something sacred. Like each small improvement was a whispered thank you from a dog that had refused to give up. She kept the stove going, started building a woodpile, and fixed the roof patch by patch. At night, she wrote. Notebooks began piling up by the windowsill. Pages of memories, reflections, things she had once buried now finding breath again. She even laughed sometimes. Until a knock came on the door. It was the middle of the day, and she wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, she froze. Cooper barked twice and tried to stand, his tail stiff with alert. Emily stepped quietly toward the door and peeked through the boarded-over window. A man in a brown flannel jacket stood outside, his breath fogging the air. It took her a moment to recognize him. Wes. She opened the door slowly. What are you doing here? Wes looked like he had aged 10 years since she'd last seen him. His beard had gone mostly gray, and deep creases marked the corners of his eyes. I heard someone had been coming up here, he said. Wasn't sure if it was true. Why would you care? I always cared, Em. The use of her name made her stomach twist. No one had called her that in years. He looked past her and spotted Cooper lying near the fire. Is that? His voice broke. Yeah, she said. It's him. Wes stepped in slowly, pulling his cap off. He crouched near the dog but didn't touch him. Didn't think he'd still be alive. He almost wasn't, Emily said quietly. Wes nodded. You should have called me. I didn't think you wanted to be found. That makes two of us. For a long time, they said nothing. Cooper shifted slightly, laying his head back down. Emily poured hot water into two mismatched mugs and handed one to Wes. They sat in silence near the fire. Wes was her brother. Half-brother, technically, from her father's second marriage. He'd shown up after their dad died, mostly out of obligation, and for a while, they'd tried to build something resembling a sibling bond. But it never quite held. Too many years apart. Too much resentment, mostly unspoken. When her mom passed, he offered to take her in. She refused. When she disappeared into the woods 3 years ago, he never looked. Or so she thought. I came up once, Wes said, breaking the silence. Emily raised an eyebrow. After you disappeared. I checked the cabin. You weren't here. She looked away. I didn't come back until now. He nodded. Figure that out. He pulled something from his coat, a small, leather-bound notebook. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside were pages and pages of search notes. Old newspaper clippings. Descriptions of trails, landmarks, even brief interviews he'd done with people in town asking if they'd seen her. I didn't stop looking, he said. I just didn't know where else to go. She blinked hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. You never said anything. Didn't think you wanted to be found. Emily exhaled shakily, clutching the notebook. I didn't. Not then. They both turned toward Cooper. He did, Wes said. That night, Wes stayed in the cabin. There wasn't much room, but he didn't seem to mind. Emily gave him the patched-up cot while she slept by Cooper like always. For the first time, the space didn't feel like a refuge or a cage, just a place people had chosen to be. Before they fell asleep, Wes asked her something she hadn't expected. You staying for good? I think so. He was quiet for a moment. Then I'll bring more supplies up. Make a run once a week. She looked at him, surprised. You don't have to. I know, he said. But I want to. Over the next few days, Wes returned twice. Once with a bundle of insulation rolls for the roof, and another time with 2 bags of dog food, a portable generator, and a stack of paperbacks she used to read in high school. Cooper had begun limping further into the woods with her during her daily walks, even sniffing at small squirrels and birds again. He wasn't ready to run, but he was ready to live. And Emily? She felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Something she once mistook for pain, but now realized was hope. On the 5th day of Wes's visits, he brought something else. A photo. It was from a winter years ago. Emily, maybe 10 years old, lying in the snow making a snow angel. Cooper, young, bright-eyed, was caught mid-jump beside her. She laughed aloud when she saw it. I remember this. You cried afterward because he crushed your snow angel. They both laughed. She hung the photo near the window, next to her newest notebook. It caught the light just right in the morning. By the start of the 3rd week, the snow around the cabin had softened into a patchwork of crust and melt. Puddles formed where the sunlight pierced through the pine canopy. Birds had returned, too, first in shy flocks, then with more confidence, filling the air with chirps and rustling feathers. Emily woke to the sound of Cooper's paws shifting against the wood floor. He was already at the door, staring out. Tail up. She watched him for a moment before getting up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. You want to go for a walk? He looked back at her, ears perked. All right, she smiled. Let's do it. This was the first time she didn't need to coax him. He moved ahead of her, slow but steady, navigating the trail like it had been etched into his memory. Emily followed, half expecting him to tire after a few minutes. But he didn't stop. They made their way down an old side trail that looped around the frozen creek. She hadn't been this far in years. As they walked, the woods seemed to lean in around them, watching, remembering. Did you come out here while I was gone? She asked aloud, more to herself than to him. Cooper didn't answer, of course, but he paused by a fallen log. Sniffed the air. Then kept walking. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. They stopped at a clearing she didn't remember well. But Cooper clearly did. He walked straight to a specific spot near a wide birch tree and sat down. His eyes closed briefly, as if listening for something. Emily stepped up beside him. What is this place? She looked around. It wasn't much, a ring of stones, a patch of earth that looked a little flatter than the rest. Like someone had cleared it once. Then she saw it. A single rock, flat and round, placed carefully atop a smaller pile. She knelt and brushed the snow away. There, beneath the stone, was an old cloth pouch. She opened it slowly. Inside was a dog tag. But not Cooper's. Her breath caught. The name etched into the metal was Piper. She sat down slowly. Piper. It came back in flashes. Piper had been a therapy dog that her mom trained years ago. She'd been a rescue, much older, mellow, always trailing behind Cooper like a quiet shadow. She died the winter before her mom passed. Emily hadn't known they buried her here. She looked at Cooper. His head was lowered. His paw stretched toward the small mound of stones. You brought her here, she said, voice barely above a whisper. And suddenly she understood. This is where he went when she left. To visit the one who left before both of them. Emily sat beside the makeshift grave for a long time, her hand resting gently on the stones. She didn't cry. She just breathed. When she finally stood, she noticed something strange, a weathered stick jammed into the soil nearby. Curious, she pulled it free. Tied around the end was a scrap of blue ribbon. Faded. Tattered. She had tied it to Cooper's collar the day her mom died. She'd forgotten all about it after it fell off. She stared at it now, amazed. Why did you bring it here? Cooper nudged the ribbon once with his nose. Then looked at her. She understood. That night, she placed the ribbon in a wooden box by the fire, beside Piper's tag and a photograph of her mother holding both dogs in their younger years. A memory box. Not to bury this time, but to keep. The next morning, Wes came by earlier than usual. He had a roll of chicken wire in his truck and a toolkit slung over his shoulder. "What's that for?" Emily asked. "I figured maybe we build a little fence," he said. "So Cooper doesn't wander too far when you're not watching." She raised an eyebrow. "He listens better than most people I know." Wes shrugged. "Still, he's got a wandering heart." They spent the afternoon hammering small posts into the thawing ground. Cooper supervised from a sunny patch of dirt, his tail occasionally swishing like he disapproved of their construction skills. At one point, Emily caught Wes staring at him. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Just thinking, he waited out here all this time. I mean, how? What made him stay?" Emily looked toward Cooper. "I don't know," she said. "But maybe he was waiting for all of us." Wes didn't say anything after that. Just kept hammering. That night, Wes left before sunset. Emily sat beside Cooper by the fire, fingers curled around a chipped mug of tea. "I think I was wrong about what I needed," she said softly. He looked up. "I kept thinking I needed space. Time. Distance. But maybe I just needed to come back." Cooper shifted closer, placing his paw on her knee. She held it. "Please stay this time," she whispered again. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, a soft snow began to fall. Not the heavy kind. The kind that melts when it touches skin. The knock came again, but this time, it wasn't Wes. It was 2 days after the walk to Piper's grave, and Emily had just finished sealing a draft near the back wall with a heavy wool curtain when the raps echoed through the quiet. Cooper stood up quickly, not barking this time, just alert. She opened the door slowly. A woman in a beige parka stood on the porch. Mid-50s, maybe, with tired eyes and a long red scarf wrapped twice around her neck. "Emily?" the woman asked. "Yes. I'm Nora. I run the shelter. In town." Emily blinked. "The shelter's still open?" Nora smiled faintly. "Barely. But yes." She glanced down and spotted Cooper behind Emily. Her breath caught. "Oh," she said softly. "So it's true." They sat by the fire, mugs in hand. Cooper rested nearby, quietly observing Nora as if trying to place her scent. She reached out gently and stroked his head. "I was the one who brought him to the shelter the first time," she said. "He'd been found along the road with a limp and a cracked paw pad. Some hiker saw him, called it in." Emily swallowed hard. "That was after I left." Nora nodded. "He wouldn't let anyone near him at first. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't drink. But every day, he'd stare out the back window. Just staring into the woods." She paused. "We assumed he'd belonged to someone from the valley. But the roads were blocked, and no one claimed him. After a few weeks, he disappeared. Dug under the gate one night and vanished." Emily's hand trembled slightly as she took another sip. "He was coming back here," she whispered. "I guess he knew this place better than we did," Nora said. They sat in silence for a while. Then Nora pulled something from her bag, a small, weather-worn flyer. Emily's name was printed at the top. "Missing." She winced at the sight of it. Nora placed it gently on the table. "We didn't stop looking. Some of us, anyway." Emily felt the heaviness settle in again. Not shame, something else. A kind of overwhelmed gratitude too tangled to speak out loud. "I didn't think anyone still remembered," she said. "We remember the ones who disappear," Nora replied. "Especially when they come back." As Nora stood to leave, she looked down at Cooper again. "Do you mind if I take a photo?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. Nora knelt down and snapped a quiet photo of Cooper curled by the fire. Then another of him standing, watching the woods through the front window. As she walked to the door, she turned back. "If you need anything, the shelter's closing next month. For good. But I'll be there till the end." Emily nodded. "Thank you." After Nora left, Emily sat beside Cooper and whispered, "You had people looking for you too." His eyes drifted closed slowly. The next morning, she packed a small bag. Just a few supplies, nothing serious. Enough for a day trip into town. She didn't tell Wes she was coming. Just left a note on the fence gate in case he stopped by. She needed to see it for herself. The shelter sat near the southern edge of Alder Ridge. A small, worn building behind the library. It was quiet when she arrived, too quiet. Inside, a single bell above the door jingled as she stepped in. The place smelled of pine cleaner and old fur. Nora looked up from behind the counter. "I didn't expect you so soon." Emily glanced around. Only 3 kennels were occupied. 2 of the dogs barked softly. One didn't move at all, just watched her silently. "This used to be full," Emily said. "We used to have more people." "What happened?" Nora shrugged. "The town got smaller. Fewer volunteers. Fewer adoptions. Funds dried up." Emily walked past the kennels slowly, stopping beside one where a skinny black lab was curled up in a tight ball. "What happens to them?" "I'm trying to get them placed in nearby towns," Nora said. "But we're running out of time." Emily stood still for a long time. Then she turned back toward Nora. "I'll take one." Nora looked stunned. "Are you sure?" "Not today. But I will. One of them. Before the shelter closes." A small smile broke across Nora's face. "You're the first person to say that in months." Emily crouched beside the lab's kennel. The dog didn't move at first. Then slowly, cautiously, it crept forward. Sniffed the air through the bars. And laid its head down. Watching her. That night, Emily returned to the cabin with Cooper, exhausted but strangely energized. As she unpacked the bag, she found Nora had tucked something into the side pocket. A small slip of paper. It read, "He waited for you. Just like we did." She placed the note in the memory box beside the photo of her and Piper. Later that night, as the fire burned low, she curled next to Cooper and whispered, "You weren't the only one holding on, were you?" He blinked. A slow, knowing blink. The temperature dropped sharply that night. Not like before, not the creeping, lingering cold of the early winter weeks, but a sudden, biting chill that sliced through the cracks in the cabin walls and settled deep in the floorboards. Emily woke before dawn, breath visible in the air. She rolled over instinctively to check on Cooper. He wasn't by the fire. Panic bloomed in her chest like a firestorm. She stood quickly, calling softly, "Cooper?" No sound. She grabbed her coat and flashlight, heart pounding. The door was ajar, just slightly, the wind pressing it open and shut. She threw it wide and stepped onto the porch barefoot, scanning the dark woods. Then she saw him. He was standing in the clearing just beyond the cabin. Still. Watching something. Emily stepped down into the snow, barefoot steps forgotten. "Cooper," she called again, louder. He didn't turn. She hurried toward him. When she reached him, she gently touched his side. He flinched, then leaned into her slightly. "What are you doing out here?" she whispered. His gaze was fixed on the tree line. And then, she saw it too. A deer, silent and still, watching them from between the trees. For a full minute, none of them moved. Then the deer turned and leapt away. Cooper sat down. And Emily knelt beside him, holding his fur. "You remembered this spot, didn't you?" she murmured. It was the same place she'd stood years ago, trying to decide whether to run or return. The very place she told him to go home. And where he sat, waiting, long after she vanished. She could almost see it now, him, year after year, returning to this spot, watching the woods, hoping she'd step back into view. "I'm here now," she whispered. "I came back." Cooper nudged her face with his nose, and she felt tears freeze against her cheeks. They returned to the cabin just as the sun crept over the trees. Emily made a fire immediately, wrapped Cooper in 3 blankets, and fed him warm broth she'd stored in a thermos from the night before. His limbs trembled slightly as he rested, but he didn't resist the care. She sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees, watching him breathe. "You brought me back here," she said. Even without saying a word. By late morning, Wes arrived with a pile of firewood and groceries. He barely had time to step inside before Emily wrapped him in a sudden hug. He stiffened at first, surprised. Then returned it. "What happened?" he asked, pulling back. She told him about the night. The deer. The spot in the woods. And how Cooper had led her there. He remembered, she said. All this time. Wes knelt by Cooper, rubbing behind his ears. "He's smarter than either of us ever gave him credit for." That day, Wes offered something unexpected. "I've got a friend who's a vet," he said. "Mobile. She could come up. Check him out." Emily hesitated. "Do you think that's a good idea?" "He hates strangers." Wes shrugged. "Might be good to know where he stands. He deserves that much." Emily looked toward Cooper, who was now sleeping peacefully beside the stove. "Okay," she said. "But only if she's gentle." The vet, a woman named Dr. Jan, arrived the next afternoon. Tall, soft-spoken, with a worn backpack and calloused hands. She didn't wear a white coat, just a thick wool sweater and jeans. The moment she stepped into the cabin, she knelt down several feet from Cooper and waited. He stared at her. She didn't move. After a long moment, Cooper stood, slowly, and walked toward her. Then sat beside her, leaning slightly. Dr. Jan smiled. "Well," she said quietly. "That's a good start." She examined him thoroughly, never rushing. Listened to his heart. Checked his joints. Cleaned his ears. When she was done, she sat back and looked at Emily. "He's old," she said gently. "Older than most his size live to be." Emily's stomach tightened. "But he's strong. And his heart's steady. He's got arthritis, and the cold's hard on his breathing, but he's not giving up anytime soon." Emily exhaled. "So, he'll be okay?" Dr. Jan nodded. "As long as he's with you?" "Yeah. He'll be okay." That evening, Emily and Wes made dinner together, actual food this time, not canned soup or crackers. Pasta, garlic bread, even salad. The cabin filled with warmth and the smell of butter and herbs. Cooper watched them from the rug near the table, tail gently thumping. They laughed more that night than they had in years. After dinner, Wes brought out a surprise, a small camera. "I figured maybe we could take some pictures." Emily hesitated, but smiled. They took turns posing with Cooper, letting the camera click and flash. Pictures of Wes holding his paw. Emily kissing the top of his head. All of them sitting in the snow outside, bundled up under the stars. They were silly, imperfect. And perfect. Later that night, Emily sat by the fire, flipping through the photos on the camera screen. One caught her breath. It was a shot Wes had taken without her noticing, Emily leaning against Cooper's side, her face buried in his fur, eyes closed, his head resting protectively on her lap. She saved that one first. She whispered to him again before bed, her voice hoarse from laughter and cold. "Thank you for waiting." Cooper didn't respond. But she didn't need him to. The following week brought a surprise thaw. Temperatures rose above freezing for the first time in months. Streams broke loose from their icy prisons, trickling softly under the snow. Birds grew louder. The woods shifted from quiet survival into something like waking up. Cooper noticed it, too. He was more alert, more mobile. Each day he rose with more confidence, pacing from the door to the woodpile, sometimes even to the edge of the trail without coaxing. Emily, wrapped in her now well-worn coat, watched him from the porch. "You're remembering how to be wild again," she whispered. He sniffed the air and barked once, a low, playful sound. Wes showed up that afternoon with an envelope in his hand. "It's from town," he said, holding it out. Emily hesitated. "What is it?" "Town council. They want to sell the land. Said it's been abandoned too long. Someone's been poking around about development." She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was an official notice. A petition to sell the cabin and surrounding land unless someone formally claimed and maintained it. She felt her chest tighten. "They can't just take it," she muttered. "They can," Wes said. "Unless you fight it." She looked around the cabin, the trail, the trees. She thought of Piper. Of her mother. Of the night she'd whispered to Cooper and he stayed anyway. She folded the letter. "Then I guess I'm fighting." The next day, she went into town. Cooper rode with her, curled into the back seat, head out the window as they passed familiar trees and winding bends in the road. She parked near the library and stepped inside the council building across the street. Nora was already waiting inside. "I heard about the letter," she said. "I told them you'd show up." The hearing was brief, just 4 members and a table of paperwork. They asked questions. Emily answered honestly. She explained the repairs. Showed photos. Shared her plan to register the property and continue restoring it. When it was done, they told her they'd be in touch. But as she stepped out, she already felt different. Like this place was no longer something to hide in. It was something she was fighting for. On the drive back, Cooper sat upright, eyes watching the woods pass by like he'd missed them in real time. At one point, Emily pulled over. "This is it," she said. "Let's see how far you want to go." She grabbed a light pack and opened the back door. Cooper leapt down. Not with the grace of youth, but with intention. They followed the old trail again. This time, Cooper led. He didn't stop by Piper's grave, though they passed it. Instead, he moved further. Deeper. To a place Emily hadn't seen since she was a teenager. A high bluff overlooking the whole valley. Snow still dusted the edge, but the view stretched out wide. Trees like waves. Rivers carving the landscape far below. She stood there in silence, wind curling around her. Cooper lay down beside her, panting slightly. "I used to think running was strength," she said. "But you stayed." She knelt and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm learning." That evening, back at the cabin, Wes had left another box on the porch. Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign. It read, "Cooper's Watch." She ran her hand over the letters, carved deep and smooth into the pine. Below that, a second line, "Where loyalty lives." She mounted it beside the door. No ceremony. Just a nail and a hammer. It belonged there. Later that night, she lit the lantern and sat beside the stove, notebook open in her lap. Cooper lay beside her, breathing slow and even. She wrote. "Some say dogs don't remember like we do. That they live moment to moment. But I think memory lives in their waiting. In the trails they walk again. In the places they lie down and look toward the woods like they're hoping something lost might return. She closed the notebook, tears brimming in her eyes. "He never forgot," she whispered. "And neither will I." Outside, wind picked up. But the cabin didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like home. The thaw deepened into spring. What was once brittle and quiet began to hum again. New leaves budded on the trees. The wind smelled different, earthy and alive. Cooper walked without stumbling now, though he still slept longer in the afternoons. Emily kept a close eye, but she knew he was proud. He'd made it through the winter. So had she. But something still lingered. Something she hadn't said out loud. One warm morning, while Cooper lay in the sun by the fence, she took a walk alone. Down the path they used to run when she was young. Through the creek bend, past the blackberry bushes. Until she reached the clearing she'd always avoided. The place where she said goodbye to her mother. There was no marker, no cross. Just the wide ring of trees and the echo of memory. Emily stood still. In her hand, she held the ribbon Cooper had saved, faded and frayed, still smelling faintly of pine smoke. She knelt in the grass. "I never told anyone what happened that day," she whispered. The wind shifted. "I was supposed to take her to town. She said she didn't feel well. But I told her we could go tomorrow." She swallowed hard. "When I woke up, she was gone." Her heart gave out in her sleep. She stared at the grass. "I told myself it was my fault. That if I hadn't pushed it off, maybe she'd still be here." Her voice trembled. "So I ran. I didn't want to be found. I didn't think I deserved it." She looked toward the path where she'd first seen Cooper running back years ago. "And then you waited. All this time. You didn't blame me. You just stayed." She laid the ribbon in the grass. Not as an offering, but as closure. When she returned to the cabin, Cooper was awake. He met her halfway down the trail, tail slow and gentle. She knelt and kissed his head. "I told her," she whispered. Finally. That night, she added one more thing to the memory box, a drawing she made from the bluff. A pencil sketch of Cooper overlooking the valley, the wind lifting the fur on his ears. She titled it, "The One Who Waited." A few days later, Wes called. "I talked to the council. They approved your application. The land's yours." Emily blinked into the phone. "Really? Really? It's protected now. No one can touch it." She exhaled shakily. "Thanks, Wes. You did all the work. I just handed in the papers." She looked around the cabin. "Still feels like she's here," she said. Wes was quiet. "I think she is." That weekend, Emily drove into town again. Not to meet the council. To visit the shelter. It was nearly empty now, just one dog left. The black lab she'd seen weeks ago. The same one who had silently watched her through the bars. Emily knelt beside the kennel. "You still here, huh?" The dog walked forward and pressed its head against the bars. Nora stepped beside her. "She's been waiting." Emily smiled softly. "I know the feeling." She named the dog Olive. And when they got home, Cooper didn't even bark. He sniffed her once, circled twice, then laid down near the fire like nothing had changed. Except everything had. Emily watched the two of them as the sun set. One old. One young. But both survivors. Both waiting for something, and now having found it. That evening, she wrote again. She scribbled until her fingers cramped. Words like roots. Anchoring her. She wrote about the girl who disappeared. The mother who passed too soon. The brother who didn't give up. The shelter that held on. The town that remembered. And the dog who never stopped waiting. She wrote it all. And then, gently, she wrote the last line. "Please stay this time." Cooper, snoring softly nearby, shifted in his sleep. And Olive, her head on her paws, lifted one ear as if she'd heard the whisper too. Spring ripened into early summer. The trees now swayed heavy with grain. Ferns unfurled like secrets. The creek had grown bold again, splashing over rocks and weaving silver through the roots of the woods. Cooper's steps were slower now. His breathing heavier. But his spirit? It remained unchanged. Emily could see it in his eyes. He had done what he came to do. He had waited. He had watched over her. And now, he rested without fear. One golden morning, Cooper nudged her knee after breakfast, tail wagging gently, head tilted toward the door. "You want to go?" she asked, smiling. He woofed once, quietly. She packed light, water, a blanket, her sketchbook. And the scarf he used to wear, freshly washed. Olive padded beside them, bouncy and curious, occasionally distracted by birds. But Cooper never strayed. He walked beside Emily, slow but proud. Like he remembered this path in his bones. They went farther than usual. Back to the bluff. The place where the sky felt bigger than the world. Cooper laid down near the edge as the breeze moved through the trees. Emily sat beside him, sketchbook in her lap. She drew as the light changed, his face, his shape, his eyes watching the horizon. And when the sun began to lower, she rested her hand on his paw. He turned his head and looked at her. She whispered the words again. "Please stay this time." And in that moment, with the light turning orange and gold all around them, she felt it. Not fear. Not goodbye. Just presence. That night, Cooper curled up beside the hearth, deeper than usual in sleep. Emily stayed with him, Olive at her side. She didn't sleep. She just watched his chest rise and fall. Until it slowed. Then stopped. There were no howls. No cries. Just the quiet settling of air around them. Like the woods had exhaled. Emily leaned down and pressed her forehead to his. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for waiting." The next day, Wes came. They buried Cooper beside Piper, under the birch tree in the clearing. Emily carved the words into the stone herself. Cooper, the one who waited. He stayed until she returned. She placed the scarf over the fresh earth, weighted with the same ribbon he once carried. Beside it, a pressed wildflower. And a page from her sketchbook, the drawing of him at the bluff. Olive lay nearby the whole time, head down, tail still. When they finished, Emily sat beside the grave in silence. It didn't feel like the end. Not exactly. More like the close of a chapter she had once feared to write. And now? She had written every word. Weeks passed. The cabin was brighter now. She repainted the shutters. Hung new shelves. Started a garden. Wes visited often. Sometimes with tools. Sometimes just to talk. The shelter officially closed. Nora retired and moved south, but she sent Emily postcards, always with a hand-scribbled note about how proud she was. And Olive? She grew into herself. Protective, playful, stubborn. A different dog than Cooper. But Emily didn't compare them. They each had their story. And Olive's had just begun. One morning, Emily packed her bag. Notebook. Water. A pencil. She whistled, and Olive trotted to her side. At the door, she paused. Then gently touched the sign that still hung there, Cooper's watch. And smiled. They walked together toward the trees, the sun high, the wind light. Down the trail Cooper knew. Up the bluff he loved. To the place where she could sit, and draw, and write. And remember. Not with pain. But with gratitude. Her last entry in the notebook that day read, "He stayed until I could return. Until I could remember what mattered. And when he knew I was home, he left. But he never really left me. He's in every path I walk. Every breeze I feel. Every whisper of the trees. He stayed until I learned how to stay, too." Emily closed the notebook, turned her face toward the valley, and whispered one last time, "Stay with me." The wind curled around her gently, like a promise.